35,000 feet above ground, Lillian Drake, Forbes' youngest self-made billionaire, was losing control. Not of her empire, not of her board, but of a 9-pound infant who wouldn't stop screaming. First-class passengers shot daggers with their eyes. Her designer suit felt like a straitjacket. Her hands shook as Evan's wails grew louder, sharper, more desperate. Then turbulence hit, and through the chaos, a stranger from economy appeared. Calloused hands, worn jacket, eyes that had seen real loss, and did the impossible. Stay with me until the end. Hit like and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The cabin smelled like expensive leather and quiet judgment. Lillian Drake sat in 2A, the window seat she'd specifically requested because it meant one less person to deal with, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this powerless. Maybe never. Power was her language. Boardrooms bent to her will. Investors scrambled for her attention. $3 billion in assets didn't accumulate by accepting defeat. But Evan, her 7-month-old son, didn't care about quarterly earnings or market projections. He cared that something was wrong, and he couldn't tell her what. Shh, baby, please. Her voice came out wrong. Too tight, too desperate. Not the voice that commanded conference rooms. Please, Evan, please. The baby arched his back against her chest, face red and furious, tiny fists beating against her collarbone. His cries weren't the fussy kind she'd learned to handle with feeding or diaper changes. These were primal, gut-wrenching screams that seemed to vibrate through the aircraft's aluminum bones. Around her, first class transformed into a gallery of disapproval. The silver-haired man in 1C lowered his Wall Street Journal with theatrical slowness, eyebrows raised in aristocratic disdain. Across the aisle, a woman in Chanel pursed her lips and adjusted her noise-canceling headphones with pointed deliberation. Behind Lillian, someone exhaled loudly, a sound designed to carry maximum reproach. She'd built Drake Technologies from a college dorm room to a Silicon Valley giant. She'd stared down venture capitalists twice her age. She'd given a keynote at Davos without notes. But right now, surrounded by people who measured success and inherited wealth and unspoken rules, she felt like she was 19 again, scholarship kid in a room full of trust funds, desperately trying to prove she belonged. "Ma'am?" The flight attendant appeared, perfectly composed in navy blue, voice professionally neutral. "Is there anything I can get you? Perhaps some water?" Translation: "Can you make this stop?" "I've tried everything." Lillian heard the crack in her voice and hated it. "I don't know what's wrong." The attendant's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes flicked toward the other passengers, calculating complaints, weighing protocols. "I'm sure he'll settle down soon. Babies cry on planes all the time." But not in first class. The unspoken rule hung between them. Lillian bounced Evan gently, then more urgently. She tried the pacifier again. He spat it out. She checked his diaper, his temperature, looked for anything obvious. Nothing. Medical school hadn't been in her trajectory, but she'd read enough parenting books to fill a library. None of them mentioned what to do when your baby screamed like the world was ending and a cabin full of strangers silently voted you off the island. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She couldn't check it. Didn't matter. Probably Marcus with another crisis that suddenly felt microscopic. Server outage? Handle it. Competitor launching a rival product? Tuesday. Baby won't stop crying in front of people who already think you don't belong? Uncharted territory. Some mothers just don't have the touch. The words came from 3A, a woman who looked like she'd been born holding a junior league membership card. Tasteful pearls, perfect bob, the kind of smooth forehead that cost 5 figures to maintain. She wasn't speaking to Lillian. She was speaking about her to her companion at a volume calibrated for maximum impact. "Probably has a nanny at home doing all the real work," the companion agreed. "You can always tell." Heat crawled up Lillian's neck. She wanted to turn around to explain that she'd been up since 4 doing market analysis for the Tokyo launch, that she'd pumped breast milk in an airport bathroom while on a conference call, that she was flying to Seattle for a pitch meeting that could determine her company's entire next quarter, and she'd brought Evan because the alternative was leaving him for 4 days and she couldn't. She just couldn't. But explaining felt like losing. So she held her screaming son and let the strangers think what they wanted. The worst part? Some dark corner of her brain wondered if they were right. Evan's grandmother, Marcus's mother, had said it the day Lillian went back to work. Some women are built for motherhood, dear. Others are built for other things. Nothing wrong with knowing which you are, said with a smile, over brunch, where the cruelty could hide behind concern. Lillian had proven her wrong every day since, had hired the best nanny, blocked out sacred hours for Evan, turned down travel when possible. She'd made it work because making impossible things work was literally her job description. But in this moment, 35,000 feet above reality, with her son inconsolable and a plane full of witnesses, the doubt crept in like carbon monoxide. Maybe try patting his back differently, someone suggested from across the aisle. Have you checked if he's overtired? My grandson was colicky. That sounds like colic. Everyone had advice. No one offered actual help. Lillian tried them all. Different positions, different bounces, humming lullabies she half remembered from her own childhood. Nothing worked. Evan's cries escalated, somehow finding new registers of desperation. Other babies had started fussing in sympathy, a domino effect of infant distress spreading through the cabin. She felt sweat pooling at the base of her spine, soaking into the silk blouse that had cost more than her first car. Her carefully styled hair had come loose. Her makeup probably looked like a disaster. The armor she wore every day, the perfectly curated image of a woman who had her life together, was cracking in real time. I'm sorry, she whispered to Evan, to the cabin, to herself. I'm so sorry. The plane hit an air pocket. Not turbulence yet, just a sudden drop that made stomachs float and drinks jump in their glasses. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Evan's screams somehow doubled in volume, feeding off the disruption, and Lillian felt her own panic rising to meet his. Get it together. You've handled worse. You faced down hostile boards and SEC investigations, and that investor who tried to tank your stock price because you wouldn't sleep with him. A crying baby and some turbulence are nothing, but her hands were shaking, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. And Evan's face was purple now, his little body rigid with whatever distress he couldn't articulate. And what if something was actually wrong? What if it wasn't just crying? What if she'd missed something and she was up here trapped in a metal tube with no way to help him, and everyone was watching her fail? Excuse me. The voice came from behind and above, from economy, where the curtain that separated worlds had been pulled aside by someone who clearly didn't care about invisible boundaries. Lillian looked up. He stood in the aisle like he'd always been meant to be there. Tall, but not imposing, broad-shouldered in a way that suggested physical work rather than gym memberships. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair showing the first hints of silver at the temples. Face that had seen weather and worry, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting at problems until they made sense. His jacket was worn at the elbows. His jeans had paint stains. He looked like he belonged in a hardware store or on a construction site, anywhere but first class, where wealth whispered instead of worked. But his eyes were kind. I don't mean to intrude, he said, and his voice had the same quiet competence as his posture. But I have a 7-year-old, and I remember those nights. May I? Lillian stared at him. The logical part of her brain, the part that had built a tech empire through ruthless analysis and calculated risk, cataloged everything wrong with this scenario. Stranger. Unknown motivation. Every parenting book warned against trusting random people with your child. But Evan was still screaming, and this man's hands were steady, and something in his expression told her he wasn't here to judge. He was here because he'd been here, in some version of this hell, and survived. She started to say she didn't need help, then realized how absurd that would sound over Evan's wails. I've tried everything. I know. He moved closer, not crowding, respecting the bubble of her space even as he entered it. Sometimes they just need a different pair of arms, different rhythm. May I try? The cabin had gone quiet, the bad kind of quiet, where everyone watches to see what happens next. Lillian looked at Evan's furious, tear-stained face, looked at the stranger's patient expression, calculated the odds of this being somehow worse than the current disaster. Then she did something she almost never did. She let go of control. Please, she heard herself say. The man took Evan with the casual confidence of someone who'd held countless babies, supporting the head naturally, bringing him against his chest in one smooth motion. Then he did something Lillian hadn't tried. He started walking, not bouncing, not swaying, just a slow, steady walk down the aisle toward economy, with Evan held firm against his shoulder. He hummed something low and rhythmic, not quite a song, more like a frequency designed to match a baby's heartbeat. Lillian watched, frozen in her seat, as he reached the curtain and turned back. Kept walking, kept humming, kept moving in that steady pendulum motion. Evan's cries changed. Not stopped. Not yet. But the edge came off them. The desperate, world-ending quality faded into something more manageable, fussy instead of frantic. The stranger, she realized she didn't even know his name, kept walking. Back and forth, patient as tide. And slowly, impossibly, Evan started to settle. His rigid little body relaxed, his fists unclenched. The screams downgraded to angry whimpers, then to exhausted hiccups. Then, like a miracle Lillian had stopped believing in, silence. Evan's eyes drifted closed. The stranger walked for another minute, making sure the baby was truly asleep, then carefully made his way back to Lillian's row. He crouched beside her seat, still holding Evan like the baby was made of spun glass. "He's out," the man whispered, probably exhausted himself. "You'll want to transfer him slow. He's in light sleep right now, so any sudden movement might wake him." Lillian nodded, not trusting her voice. She reached out, and together they shifted Evan back to her arms with the care of surgeons. The baby stirred, but didn't wake, settling against her chest with a shuddering sigh. The relief hit her like a physical force. "How did you—" She looked up at the stranger, who was already rising, preparing to return to economy. "What did you do?" He shrugged, a small smile touching his features. "Sometimes they just need a break from trying. You were tense, understandable, but babies feel that. I came in calm, gave him something different to focus on. The walking helps because it's movement without anxiety. And I hummed the frequency I used with my daughter when she was colicky. Old Marine Corps trick, actually." "You were in the military?" 8 years. Teaches you how to stay calm when everything's going to hell." He glanced at Evan. "Though I'll take combat zones over a screaming baby any day. At least in combat, you know what the enemy wants." Lillian found herself almost smiling. "Thank you. I didn't catch your name." "Caleb. Caleb Hayes." He extended his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. Working hands. "Lillian Drake, and this is Evan." "Good to meet you both." Caleb started backing toward the curtain. "You'll be fine now." Once they crash, they usually stay down for a while. Just keep him comfortable and... The plane dropped. Not an air pocket this time. Real turbulence, the kind that makes overhead bins rattle and experienced flyers grip their armrests. The seatbelt sign dinged frantically, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, tight with professional calm. "Folks, we're encountering some unexpected weather. Flight attendants, please be seated immediately. Passengers, remain seated with seatbelts fastened. We'll get through this shortly." The aircraft bucked like a living thing. Caleb stumbled, caught himself on Lillian's seat. Evan stirred, but didn't wake. The exhausted sleep of infants who've cried themselves past consciousness. "Sir, you need to return to your seat." A flight attendant appeared from nowhere, grabbing Caleb's arm. "Going now." The plane dropped again, harder. Someone screamed. Drinks went flying. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Caleb looked at Lillian, still clutching Evan, and something passed between them, an understanding that required no words, fear, recognition, the fragile acknowledgement that sometimes the universe just decides to test you when you're already at your limit. "You okay?" he asked. Lillian realized she was shaking, not from Evan's crying this time, from the turbulence, from the adrenaline crash, from the sudden realization that they were in a metal tube being thrown around the sky like a toy. She was terrified of flying, had been since she was 12 and her family's plane to her grandmother's funeral hit a storm. Nothing bad had happened, they'd landed safe, but something in her young brain had imprinted that helplessness, that loss of control. She'd forced herself to fly anyway, because that's what you did when building a global company. But she'd never stopped being afraid. And now, holding her infant son, exhausted and vulnerable and stripped of all her usual defenses, the fear came roaring back. She couldn't finish the lie. "Hey." Caleb dropped back into a crouch. ignoring the flight attendant's protests. Look at me, just at me. Lillian met his eyes, steady, calm, absolutely certain. You're going to be fine, he said. Not a maybe, not a hope, a fact. This plane is built for this. The pilots have done this 10,000 times. It feels scary, but we're not in danger. I need you to breathe slow, deep breaths. Can you do that? She tried. Her lungs felt tight. That's it. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Count with me. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. He counted her through it, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. The plane kept shaking, but somehow, with this stranger anchoring her, it felt survivable. Sir, please! 1 more second, Caleb told the attendant. To Lillian, you've got this. Hold Evan close, keep breathing, and remember, you run a billion-dollar company. You've faced scarier things than bad weather. How did you know? Your carry-on has your company logo, Drake Technologies. He smiled. Plus you have that look, the one that says you're used to being in charge and really hate when physics reminds you that you're not. Despite everything, Lillian felt a laugh bubble up. Short, slightly hysterical, but real. The turbulence eased. Not gone, but manageable. The plane settled into a rough but steady rhythm. Caleb stood, finally letting the attendant pull him back toward economy. But he looked at Lillian one more time. You're doing better than you think, he said. Trust me. Then he was gone, disappearing behind the curtain that separated their worlds, leaving Lillian alone with her sleeping son and a strange, unfamiliar feeling she couldn't quite name. Not gratitude, though that was part of it. Something bigger. The realization that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do everything alone. The rest of the flight passed in a blur. Evan slept. Truly slept. Not the fitful dozing Lillian had grown used to. The turbulence came and went, never quite as bad as that first shock. First class returned to its usual Arctic quiet, passengers retreating behind their screens and newspapers like the disturbance had never happened. But Lillian couldn't settle. She held Evan, felt his warm weight against her chest, and replayed the last hour in her head. The panic. The judgment. The stranger who'd stepped in without hesitation, who'd known exactly what to do, who'd looked at her like she was a person struggling instead of a problem to be managed. When was the last time someone had just helped? In her world, help came with strings. Investors wanted equity. Advisors wanted access. Even friends, the few she had left, wanted something. The currency of her life was transaction, everything negotiable, nothing free. But Caleb Hayes hadn't wanted anything. He'd helped because someone needed help. Simple as that. It unsettled her more than the turbulence had. She tried to focus on work. Pulled out her tablet, opened the presentation for tomorrow's pitch. The numbers blurred. The slides felt hollow. All she could think about was the way Evan had relaxed in Caleb's arms, the instant trust, the complete absence of the tension he felt with her. Some mothers just don't have the touch. The words circled back, vultures waiting for weakness. Maybe they were right. Maybe Evan sensed something broken in her, some fundamental inability to just be with him instead of always trying to optimize, fix, solve. She'd approached motherhood like a project, research, systems, efficiency. But babies didn't respond to strategic planning. They needed something she'd forgotten how to give. Presence. The thought lodged in her chest like a splinter. She looked out the window at the dark sky, the distant lights of cities below. Somewhere down there, Caleb Hayes was returning to his seat in economy, probably already forgot about the crying baby in first class. It had been a moment for him, a small kindness on the way to wherever he was going. But for Lillian, something had cracked. Not broken. Cracked. Like ice at the start of spring, revealing water underneath. She'd built her entire adult life on control, on the belief that success meant never needing anyone, never showing weakness, never admitting you couldn't handle something alone. It had served her well. Forbes covers, keynote speeches, respect from people who'd dismissed her at 19, but it had also left her here, 31 years old, on a plane, holding her son like a stranger might hold a borrowed item, terrified of the moment when she'd have to prove she could do this. What if she couldn't? What if the people who whispered behind her back were right, and she'd made a mistake trying to have both, the empire and the baby, the boardroom and the nursery? What if there was only so much of a person to go around, and she'd spent hers building something that would outlast her but never love her back? Evan stirred against her chest, making the small snuffling sounds that preceded waking. Lillian tensed, preparing for round 2 of the nightmare. But he just shifted, found a more comfortable position, and settled again. Still sleeping. Still peaceful. Lillian let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she just needed to stop trying so hard to do it perfectly. The plane began its descent into Seattle, the long, gradual drop that always made her ears pop and her stomach clench. She held Evan closer, felt his heartbeat against hers, and made a decision. She was going to find Caleb Hayes before they landed. Not to thank him, though she should. Not to get parenting advice, though that would help. But because something about that brief interaction had shown her a glimpse of a different way to live. One where you could be powerful and vulnerable, competent and human, successful and struggling. One where you didn't have to pretend you had all the answers. The landing was smooth. Passengers began gathering belongings, that familiar rustle of people preparing to escape confinement. Lillian packed up quickly, one-handed, Evan still asleep in her other arm, a skill she'd mastered out of necessity. She stood, stepped into the aisle, and looked back toward economy. The curtain was open now, both sections mixing as people filed toward the exit. She scanned the crowd, looking for that worn jacket, those steady eyes. There, 3 rows back, gathering a small backpack and helping a little girl with pigtails collect her stuffed rabbit from under the seat. His daughter. Lillian's stomach did something complicated. He wasn't just some random helpful guy. He was a father, traveling with his child, who'd still taken time to help a stranger because that's who he was. She made a decision that felt simultaneously reckless and overdue. Instead of heading straight to the exit, she waited, letting others pass, until Caleb and his daughter reached her row. "Hi again," she said, and heard how awkward it came out, too formal, too corporate. She tried again. "I wanted to say thank you, properly." Caleb smiled, surprised. "No need. Glad I could help." His daughter tugged his hand. "Daddy, who's that?" "This is..." Caleb looked at Lillian. "Lillian, and this is Evan." She adjusted the baby so the girl could see. "He was having a hard time earlier, and your dad helped." The girl, 7, maybe, with her father's dark eyes and a scattering of freckles across her nose, studied Evan with the serious concentration of children evaluating other small humans. "He's really little," she pronounced. "Does he cry a lot?" "Maya." Caleb's tone carried gentle warning. "It's okay." Lillian found herself almost smiling. "Yeah, sometimes he does. I'm still learning how to help him." "Daddy's really good with babies," Maya said, matter of fact. "He was good with me when I was little, and he was good with Mama before she got sick." The air changed. Caleb's expression flickered, pain quickly controlled. "Maya, let's not..." "It's okay to talk about Mama," Maya said, with the odd wisdom of children who've learned grief too young. "You said so." Lillian felt like she'd stumbled into something private, something she had no right to witness. But Maya was looking at her with complete openness, and Caleb was just handling it the way he seemed to handle everything, with quiet competence and no pretense. "I'm sorry," Lillian said, meaning it. Caleb nodded. "Thank you. It's been 2 years. We're doing okay." He squeezed Maya's shoulder. "Aren't we, Bug?" "We're doing great," Maya corrected. Then to Lillian, "Your baby is lucky. You seem nice." Something in Lillian's chest cracked a little wider. "Thank you," she managed. The line was moving now, passengers impatient to escape the plane. Caleb gave her one more smile, small, genuine, the kind that reached his eyes, and started to turn away. Lillian heard herself speak before she'd consciously decided to. "Do you live in Seattle?" He paused. "Tacoma, actually, about 40 minutes south. You?" "I'm here for work, 2 days." She hesitated, then pushed through the discomfort of asking for something without knowing what she was really asking for. "Would you, if you have time, could I buy you coffee? To say thank you, you and Maya?" Caleb studied her for a long moment. Not suspicious, just considering. Like he was trying to figure out what she actually needed and whether he could provide it. "You don't have to do that," he said finally. "I know, but I'd like to." Maya tugged his hand again. "Can we, Daddy? I want to show her Mr. Flop Ears. She held up the stuffed rabbit. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. A decision made, a risk accepted. Sure, he said. Tomorrow morning? There's a place near Pike Market, Cafe Umbria. Around 9? Lillian pulled out her phone, added it to her calendar with the same efficiency she applied to board meetings. But her hands were shaking slightly, and she wasn't entirely sure why. 9 o'clock, she confirmed. I'll be there. They exchanged numbers. Practical, simple, the kind of thing normal people did all the time. But for Lillian, who guarded her personal contact information like nuclear codes, it felt significant. Then they were off the plane, into the bright sterility of the airport, and Caleb and Maya disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the current of travelers heading toward baggage claim and ground transportation and whatever lives waited for them outside. Lillian stood still for a moment, Evan warm against her chest, and wondered what she'd just done. Made a friend? Arranged a thank you coffee? Stepped into something she didn't understand? All of the above, probably. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. The reminder about tomorrow's pitch. Reality reasserting itself. She had a car waiting, a hotel room booked, a presentation to finalize, a company to run. But for the first time in years, the work felt like something she was doing instead of something she was. And that difference, small as it seemed, felt like the beginning of something she couldn't name yet. Something that might, if she let it, change everything. The hotel room was exactly what Lillian had expected. Sterile luxury, the kind of space designed to remind business travelers they were successful but never quite at home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, a king bed with too many decorative pillows, a desk positioned for maximum productivity. She'd stayed in 100 rooms like this. But tonight, it felt different. Maybe because Evan was there, asleep in the portable crib the hotel had provided, his small chest rising and falling with the peaceful rhythm of someone who'd exhausted themselves completely. Or maybe because Lillian kept checking her phone, looking at the contact she'd added. Caleb Hayes. Just a name and number, but it felt like a door she'd opened without fully understanding what was on the other side. She should be working. The pitch meeting was in 9 hours, and she hadn't reviewed the deck since the flight. But every time she opened her laptop, her mind wandered, back to the plane. Back to that moment when a stranger had taken her son and done what she couldn't. Not because he was smarter or better or more qualified, just because he'd been calm when she wasn't. It shouldn't matter. It was one interaction, one moment of kindness in a life full of transactions. But something about it had lodged under her skin like a splinter working its way towards something vital. She gave up on work around midnight, took a shower that was supposed to be quick, but turned into 20 minutes of standing under scalding water trying to wash away the exhaustion. When she finally crawled into bed, Evan woke up hungry, and she fed him in the dark, his small hands patting her chest absently while he ate. "What are we doing, baby?" she whispered. "What am I doing?" Evan didn't answer, just ate, oblivious to his mother's crisis of competence. She must have dozed off after, because the next thing she knew, pale Seattle morning was filtering through the curtains, and Evan was making his pre-cry warm-up noises, the escalating grunts that meant he'd be screaming in approximately 90 seconds if his needs weren't addressed. Lillian rolled out of bed, changed him, fed him again, and looked at the time. 7:15. The pitch was at 1. Coffee with Caleb was at 9. She could cancel. Should cancel, probably. She had work to do, a presentation to perfect, a board waiting for her to prove this Seattle expansion was worth the investment. Meeting a stranger for coffee because he'd helped with her baby was exactly the kind of inefficient sentimentality she'd trained herself to avoid. But she didn't cancel. Instead, she showered again, got Evan dressed in the tiny designer onesie Marcus's mother had sent, then stared at her own wardrobe with uncharacteristic indecision. The suit felt too corporate. The casual dress felt like she was trying too hard. Everything she owned was either armor or costume, designed for specific purposes in specific contexts. She settled on dark jeans and a silk blouse. Still expensive, still polished, but less like she was heading to a deposition. The Uber ride to Pike Place Market took 20 minutes through morning traffic, Evan strapped into the car seat she traveled with everywhere. The driver tried to make small talk about the weather, and Lillian gave him the polite but minimal responses she'd perfected over years of wanting to be left alone. Cafe Umbria sat tucked into a corner near the market entrance. The kind of place that had existed long before craft coffee became a lifestyle brand. Small, worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, the smell of espresso and old books. Through the window, Lillian could see Caleb already there, Maya sitting across from him with a hot chocolate, both of them bent over what looked like a coloring book. Something in Lillian's chest tightened. They looked so easy together, so comfortable, like being father and daughter was as natural as breathing. She almost turned around, but Evan chose that moment to grab a fistful of her hair and yank with the impressive strength of small children everywhere, and the sharp pain jolted her forward. Through the door, into the cafe, into whatever this was. Caleb looked up as the bell chimed, his face shifting into a smile that seemed genuinely pleased to see her. "You made it," he said, standing. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why not?" He gestured at her, at the designer bag, the expensive stroller she was unfolding. "You look like someone whose time costs more per hour than most people make in a day. Figured you might have better things to do than coffee with strangers." Lillian didn't know how to explain that she'd almost canceled 3 times, that she was here despite every instinct that told her this was a waste of resources, that she still wasn't sure why she'd come, except that something about yesterday had shaken her foundation and she needed to understand what. "I wanted to say thank you," she said instead. "Properly." "You did that on the plane." "With words. I'm better with actions." Caleb's smile shifted into something more amused. "Okay. Well, actions appreciated. Have a seat. What do you want?" "Coffee's on me, since you're the guest." "I'm supposed to be buying." "You can get the next one." The casual assumption of a next one should have felt presumptuous. Instead, it felt oddly comforting, like he'd already decided this was worth repeating, and she didn't have to prove anything. Maya tugged Caleb's sleeve. "Daddy, can I show her Mr. Flopears now?" "Let Lillian sit down first, Bug." But Lillian was already lowering herself into the chair across from them, settling Evan in her lap. The baby was in one of his rare, peaceful moods, big eyes taking in the new environment with the serious concentration of scientists studying alien worlds. Maya immediately held up the stuffed rabbit, gray, missing one eye, loved into that state of near destruction that signaled true attachment. "This is Mr. Flopears," Maya announced. "Mama gave him to me when I was 3. He goes everywhere." "He looks very important," Lillian said, and meant it. "He is. Daddy says Mama's watching from heaven, and Mr. Flopears helps me remember her." Maya said it matter-of-factly, the way children recite things they've been told often enough to accept as truth. "Do you have a mama?" "Maya." Caleb's voice carried gentle warning again. "It's okay." Lillian looked at this 7-year-old who asked questions adults had learned to bury. "I do. She lives in Portland. We don't talk much." "Why not?" That was the question, wasn't it? Lillian could give a dozen reasons: busy schedules, different priorities, the accumulated weight of small disappointments and large expectations unmet. But the truth was simpler and harder. "Sometimes people don't know how to talk to each other," she said finally, "even when they love each other." Maya considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "That's sad." "Yeah, it is." Caleb cleared his throat. "Coffee. Right. Lillian, what do you want?" "Americano. Black." "Shocking," he said, but his eyes were laughing. "You seem like someone who takes their coffee serious and joyless. Efficient?" "Same thing." He went to order, leaving Lillian alone with Maya and Evan and the sudden awareness that she had no idea how to make small talk with children. Her world didn't include kids. Even Evan still felt like a mystery she was learning to decode, not a person she instinctively understood. But Maya saved her. "Is Evan your only baby?" the girl asked, leaning forward to study him more closely. "Yes, he's 7 months." "That's really little. Does he sleep good?" Lillian almost laughed. "No, not really. Daddy says babies are hard. That's why grown-ups need coffee." Maya said this with the authority of someone quoting gospel. "He drinks a lot of coffee." "I bet he does." "Do you? Drink a lot of coffee?" "Probably too much." "Are you a mama who works?" The question landed differently than Lillian expected. Not judgmental, just curious. But it still hit something raw. "Yes, I run a company." "What kind?" "Technology. We make software that helps other companies do their work better. Maya absorbed this. That sounds complicated. Sometimes it is. Do you like it? No one ever asked Lillian that. They asked about revenue, market share, growth projections. They asked if she was winning. But like? That seemed almost beside the point. I used to, she heard herself say. I'm not sure anymore. Maya nodded, like this made perfect sense. Daddy says sometimes things you used to love stop feeling good because you change. He used to love the Marines, but then Mama got sick and he needed to be home more, so he stopped. Now he builds houses. That's a big change. He says it's okay to change, that people who don't change get stuck. Caleb returned with coffee, a hot chocolate for Maya, and what looked like a very serious pastry situation. Croissants, scones, something chocolate-covered that defied categorization. I didn't know what you liked, he said, distributing items. So I got options. You didn't have to do this. Maya wanted to share breakfast, and I figured you probably skipped it, so. He pushed a croissant toward her. Humor me. Lillian realized he was right. She hadn't eaten, had planned to grab something from the hotel lobby between meetings. Fuel as afterthought. The croissant looked obscenely buttery and completely impractical. She tore off a piece. It was perfect. They ate in comfortable silence for a minute, Maya coloring in her book, Evan watching everything with that intense baby focus that made him look like he was memorizing details for a future report. Lillian felt something unfamiliar settling over her. Not quite peace, but adjacent to it. A kind of suspended moment where nothing was required except existing. So, Caleb said eventually, what brings you to Seattle besides fate and a screaming baby? Work. I'm pitching a potential partnership this afternoon. Big deal? Could be. Pacific Northwest expansion, new markets, new revenue streams. She heard herself slipping into pitch mode and pulled back. Sorry. I can be boring about business. Not boring, just careful. Caleb took a sip of his coffee. You talk about work like it's a test you're still trying to pass. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Maybe it is, Lillian said. I started my company when I was 19, dropped out of college, maxed out my credit cards, built it from nothing. There are still people waiting for me to fail. Prove them right. And you won't. No. Because failing would mean they were right about you. Yes. Caleb nodded slowly. That's exhausting. Lillian blinked. She'd expected congratulations or respect, or the usual responses people gave when she shared her origin story, not empathy for how tiring it was. It is, she admitted. When do you get to stop proving yourself? I don't know. Maybe never. That's not sustainable. You sound like my therapist. You have a therapist? Doesn't everyone? Caleb laughed. Real, surprised, warm. Fair point. Though I'm more of the talk to yourself while building a deck type. Does that work? Sometimes. Other times I just end up with a really well-built deck and the same problems. He paused. Maya sees someone. After Sarah died. Helped her process it better than I could alone. The mention of his wife hung in the air. Not heavy, just present. Lillian found herself wanting to know more and having no idea how to ask without being invasive. Maya solved the problem. Mama was sick for a long time, she said, not looking up from her coloring. First she was tired, then she had to go to the hospital a lot, then she died. I was 5. Daddy cried every day for a while. Maya, It's okay, Daddy. Dr. Chen says talking about feelings is healthy. Maya looked at Lillian seriously. Daddy was really sad, but he didn't stop being my daddy. He just was sad and a daddy at the same time. Lillian felt something crack wider in her chest, that same fissure from yesterday, spreading. She looked at Caleb, who was staring at his coffee like it held answers, and saw what she'd missed before. The exhaustion under the competence, the weight under the steady calm, the evidence of someone who'd survived something that should have broken him and somehow kept going anyway. I'm sorry, she said, knowing the words were inadequate. Caleb shrugged. Cancer doesn't care about sorry, it just does what it does. He met her eyes. But we're okay. Aren't we, Bug? We're great, Maya said, echoing last night's correction. Then she added, but Daddy gets lonely sometimes. I hear him at night when he thinks I'm asleep. He sits on the porch and just sits. Maya, that's private. Dr. Chen says secrets are different from privacy. And this is privacy, but not a secret because everyone gets lonely and it's normal. Maya had clearly mastered therapeutic language. You should have more friends, Daddy. Caleb looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him. We're working on that. Are we? Yes. Since when? Since now. Can you color, please? Maya grinned, a 7-year-old's satisfaction at successfully embarrassing a parent, and returned to her book. Lillian found herself smiling despite everything. She's something. She's a nightmare, Caleb said, but his voice held nothing but love. Too smart for her own good. Gets it from her mother. What about you? I'm just smart enough to know when I'm outsmarted. Evan chose that moment to start fussing, not crying yet, just making his displeasure known. Lillian shifted him, checked his diaper, tried the pacifier. Nothing worked. The fussing escalated toward crying territory. She felt her shoulders tense, the familiar panic rising. Not here. Not again. Not in public where people would watch and judge and… May I? Caleb held out his hands. Lillian hesitated. Yesterday had been crisis mode, desperation. This was different, asking for help when she theoretically could handle it herself. That was harder somehow. But Evan was winding up, and Caleb's hands were steady, and something about yesterday had proven he knew what he was doing. She passed Evan over. Caleb did the same thing as on the plane, stood, started walking, found that rhythm. But this time he talked while he moved, low and easy. Hey, little man, what's the problem? Too much excitement? I get it. The world's pretty overwhelming. All these new faces, new sounds. Your mom brought you to a coffee shop when you probably wanted to stay in that nice, quiet hotel room. That's rough. She's learning, though. She's trying. You got to cut her some slack. Lillian watched him circle the small cafe, watched her son settle against this near stranger's shoulder, watched the casual competence that came from years of practice and hard-won experience. Maya looked up at her. Daddy's really good at that. Yeah, he is. Are you jealous? The question was so direct, so unnervingly perceptive, that Lillian almost lied. But something about this child's unflinching honesty demanded the same in return. A little, she admitted. That's dumb. Maya, it is, though. Being jealous is dumb because everyone's good at different things. You're probably really good at your work stuff. Daddy's good at babies? That's okay. Lillian stared at this 7-year-old who'd just casually dismantled an insecurity she'd been nursing for months. You're right, she said. I know. I'm smart. Also humble. Maya grinned. Daddy says humility is overrated if you're actually good at things. I don't think I said that. You did, though. When Mrs. Peterson said I shouldn't brag about my reading level. You told her I wasn't bragging. I was being accurate. Caleb came back, Evan now completely calm, even making small, happy sounds. She's got an excellent memory for things that make me look bad. He sat down, still holding Evan. But she's right. False modesty doesn't help anyone. If you're good at something, own it. Is that Marine training? That's Sarah training. She didn't have time for people who diminished themselves to make others comfortable. His voice went soft. She would have liked you, I think. You don't know me. I know you built a billion-dollar company from nothing. I know you're traveling alone with a baby because you refuse to be the kind of parent who's never around. I know you're terrified you're doing it wrong, but you keep showing up anyway. Sarah would have respected that. Lillian felt heat behind her eyes, the warning sign of tears she absolutely could not afford. Not here, not now, not in front of people who'd already seen too much. I need to use the restroom, she said abruptly, standing. She made it to the single-stall bathroom before the tears came. Just a few, quickly wiped away, evidence of weakness she couldn't afford to acknowledge. She stared at herself in the mirror, at the careful makeup and styled hair and expensive clothes, and wondered who the hell she was anymore. CEO, mother. Woman having a breakdown in a coffee shop bathroom because a stranger said something kind. She washed her face, fixed her makeup, and returned to find Caleb and Maya had been joined by Evan's diaper bag, which she'd left at the table like an idiot. Caleb was going through it with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. "He's going to need a change soon," Caleb said. "And unless I'm wrong, you're almost out of diapers." Lillian checked. He was right. She'd packed 5, used 4 on the trip, and the 5th was currently on Evan. "There's a Target 2 blocks away," Caleb continued. "We could walk over after this. Get you resupplied before your meeting." "You don't have to—" "I know. But Maya needs new shoes anyway, and it's a nice morning, and honestly, you look like you could use the company." He said it without pity, without judgment, just observation. "Okay," Lillian heard herself say. "Thank you." So they walked to Target, this bizarre little group that made no sense on paper. Billionaire CEO, widowed contractor, 7-year-old with a one-eyed rabbit, infant who'd decided Caleb was his new favorite person. They must have looked strange to passers-by, this mismatched collection. But it felt right. Inside Target, Maya took charge. "Diapers are in the baby section. I know where it is because Daddy's friend has a baby, and we helped her shop once." They followed her through the aisles, and Lillian found herself relaxing in a way she almost never did in public. No one here knew who she was. No one was watching to see if the great Lillian Drake measured up. She was just another tired parent buying diapers at Target on a Thursday morning. It was almost normal. "Size 3, Caleb confirmed, checking Evan's current diaper. "Yes." "Okay. You'll want to buy 2 boxes minimum. Trust me, you'll go through them faster than you think." They loaded up. Diapers, wipes, that diaper cream someone had recommended once, and Lillian had never tried. A few extra pacifiers because Evan had a habit of launching them into oblivion. Caleb added suggestions based on experience, and Maya threw in a stuffed elephant she insisted Evan needed, and somehow Lillian ended up with a full cart of things she hadn't known she needed, but apparently did. At the shoe section, Maya tried on approximately 15 pairs before settling on light-up sneakers that made Caleb wince at the price. "They're on sale," Maya argued. "Everything's on sale until you buy it." "That doesn't make sense." "Welcome to my life." Lillian watched them negotiate, this practiced back and forth of parent and child who'd learned each other's rhythms. It was so different from how she'd been raised. Her mother's cold silences, the sense that love was conditional on performance. This felt easy, messy and real and easy. "I'll get them," Lillian said. Both Caleb and Maya looked at her. "What?" "No. I want to. Let me do something useful." Before he could argue, she added, "You've helped me twice now. This is me returning the favor. Plus they light up. That's objectively excellent." Maya's eyes went wide. "Can I, Daddy?" Caleb looked at Lillian, something complicated crossing his features. Pride warring with practicality, warring with the recognition that his daughter really did need shoes and money was always tight. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know. I want to." He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you." At checkout, Lillian pulled out the credit card she used for personal expenses, the one that could buy a car without making a dent, and paid for everything. The total barely registered, but Caleb's quiet "thank you" registered, and Maya's excited chatter about her new shoes registered, and the way Evan had fallen asleep against Caleb's shoulder, completely trusting, registered most of all. They walked back to the cafe where Lillian's Uber was waiting. Noon now. She had an hour to get to her hotel, review the presentation one final time, and transform back into CEO mode. "Thank you for this morning," she said. "Really, it helped." "Any time." Caleb shifted Evan, preparing to hand him back. "Good luck with your pitch." "Thanks." She took Evan, and the baby stirred but didn't wake. Progress. Maya hugged her leg suddenly, surprising her. "Bye, Lillian. I hope your meeting goes good." "Thank you, sweetie." Lillian was halfway to the Uber when she turned back. Caleb and Maya were walking away, toward wherever they'd parked, and she felt something like panic at the thought of them disappearing back into their lives while she returned to hers. "Caleb," she called. He turned. "Tomorrow, if you're free. Would you want to do something? The 3 of you and Evan and me? Something normal? I don't know what normal is, but maybe you could show me." The smile that crossed his face was worth every uncomfortable second of asking. "Yeah," he said. "We'd like that." The pitch went perfectly. Lillian stood in front of 12 executives from Cascade Industries and delivered the presentation she could have given in her sleep. Growth projections, market analysis, competitive advantages, all the numbers lined up like soldiers, and she commanded them with the precision that had made her reputation. They asked hard questions. She gave harder answers. By the time she walked out, she had verbal commitment for a partnership worth $40 million in the first year alone. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, sitting in the Uber back to her hotel with Evan asleep in his car seat, she felt hollow. Like she'd just performed a play she'd memorized so long ago, she'd forgotten why she'd auditioned in the first place. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, predictably. How'd it go? They're in. Contract by end of week. Knew you'd nail it. Listen, the board wants to move the Tokyo launch up by 3 months. Chen thinks we can handle it if we reallocate resources from... Lillian stopped listening. She watched Seattle slide past the window, coffee shops and bookstores and people walking dogs, living lives that probably didn't include quarterly projections or resource allocation. When had she last walked a dog? When had she last done anything that wasn't optimized for maximum efficiency? Marcus? So if we shift the timeline and front-load the development cycle, Marcus, I need to go. Silence. Then carefully, you okay? Fine. Just tired. I'll call you tonight. She hung up before he could argue, then immediately felt guilty. Marcus didn't deserve her irritation. He was doing his job, the job they'd built together, the company that was supposed to mean everything. But right now, all she could think about was tomorrow. Whatever something normal meant with Caleb and Maya. Back at the hotel, she ordered room service she barely touched, gave Evan a bath in the sink because the tub seemed too big, and tried to work on her laptop while he napped. The words blurred. The spreadsheets meant nothing. She kept checking her phone, waiting for Caleb to text details about tomorrow, half convinced he'd cancel because he'd realized what she already knew, that she was exhausting to be around, that her life was all sharp edges and no soft places to land. But at 8, her phone buzzed. Maya wants to take you to the zoo. Fair warning, she will talk your ear off about penguins, her current obsession. If that's too much, we can do something quieter. Lillian typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, Zoo sounds perfect. What time? 10? We'll pick you up. You don't have to drive all the way here. It's 40 minutes. I've driven farther for worse reasons. She smiled at her phone like an idiot. Okay, see you at 10. Night, Lillian. She fell asleep still holding the phone. Evan curled against her in the hotel bed because the crib felt too far away and she needed to feel him breathing. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Lillian woke at 6 out of habit, checked her email out of compulsion, and immediately regretted both. 17 messages marked urgent. 3 voicemails from board members. A text from Marcus asking if she'd reviewed the Tokyo documents yet. She closed her phone and looked at Evan, awake and chewing his fist, drool everywhere. Today's about you, she told him, and me, and figuring out what normal people do on Friday mornings. Evan blew a raspberry at her, unimpressed by the declaration. She took her time getting ready. Jeans again, a sweater that wasn't designer, minimal makeup. Packed the diaper bag with the military precision she applied to everything, double-checking contents against a mental list. Diapers, wipes, bottles, backup outfit for inevitable disasters, backup outfit for the backup outfit, snacks she hoped Evan was old enough to eat, pacifiers, that stuffed elephant Maya had insisted on, sunscreen, hat, more diapers because Caleb had been right about going through them. By 9:45, she was pacing the lobby, ignoring the looks from business travelers who clearly wondered what someone in a hotel this expensive was doing with an infant and a diaper bag that looked like it could supply a small army. At 9:58, a truck pulled up, older model, paint faded, the kind of vehicle that worked for a living. Caleb climbed out, and Lillian felt something stupid happen in her chest at the sight of him in daylight, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking like every carpenter in every romantic comedy except real. "Morning," he called, moving to help with the car seat. "Ready for penguin facts?" "I don't know. Am I?" "No one is. But we're going anyway." Maya erupted from the truck, those new light-up shoes flashing with each step. "Lillian, we're going to see the penguins. Did you know penguins can hold their breath for like 20 minutes? And they eat fish and they waddle because their legs are short, and they're birds, but they can't fly, but they can swim really fast. And breathe, Bug, Caleb said. I'm breathing. Can Evan see the penguins too? Will he like them? He's really little, so maybe he won't understand, but maybe he will, because babies are smart, right? Lillian found herself grinning. He's definitely going to love the penguins. They loaded into the truck. Maya in her booster seat, Lillian in back with Evan, Caleb driving with the casual confidence of someone who'd made this trip 100 times. The interior smelled like sawdust and coffee and something indefinably lived in. Tools rattled in the truck bed. Maya's backpack overflowed with crayons and snacks. A child's drawing was taped to the dashboard. Stick figures labeled Me and Daddy and Mama in Heaven. Lillian stared at that drawing and felt something crack further in her carefully constructed walls. The drive to the Woodland Park Zoo took longer than necessary because Maya narrated every landmark, every memory, every passing thought. Caleb let her talk, occasionally interjecting with corrections or questions, but mostly just letting his daughter's enthusiasm fill the space. It was so different from Lillian's childhood car rides. Silent except for classical music, her mother's disappointment hanging in the air like humidity. "Why are you quiet?" Maya asked suddenly, turning to look at Lillian. "Just listening." "Do I talk too much?" "Mrs. Henderson says I talk too much." "Mrs. Henderson is wrong," Lillian said firmly. "You talk exactly the right amount." Maya beamed. Caleb caught Lillian's eye in the rearview mirror, and something passed between them. Gratitude, recognition, the wordless communication of adults who understood what kids needed to hear. The zoo was crowded with school groups and families, the kind of wholesome chaos Lillian never encountered in her usual life. Caleb bought tickets over her protests, then immediately handed her a map. "Maya likes to have a plan," he explained. "Otherwise she'll try to see everything and crash by noon." "I don't crash," Maya protested. "You fell asleep in the reptile house last time." "That was different. The snakes were boring." They made a plan. Penguins first, obviously, then the big cats because Maya wanted Lillian to see the tiger that was the best tiger in the whole world, then lunch, then whatever they had energy for. It was the kind of structured spontaneity that Lillian recognized from project management but had never applied to actual life. The penguin exhibit was everything Maya had promised. Glass tanks full of black and white birds diving and surfacing and generally looking like tiny formal swimmers. Maya pressed her face to the glass and delivered penguin facts at machine gun speed. Evan watched, transfixed, making small sounds of wonder that made Lillian's throat tight. "Look at that one," Maya pointed. "He's stealing fish from that one. Penguins do that. They're cute, but also kind of mean." "Like people," Caleb said. "Exactly like people. That's what I said." Lillian watched them, this father and daughter who'd figured out how to be happy despite everything life had thrown at them. She wanted to ask Caleb how he did it, how he got up every morning and made breakfast and packed lunches and built houses and raised a child alone and somehow still had energy for penguins. But the question felt too big, too raw. Instead, she took a picture of Evan watching the penguins, then another of Maya pointing animatedly at something, then one of Caleb crouched next to his daughter, both of them reflected in the glass. "You're good at that," Caleb said, noticing. "What?" "Taking pictures. You frame them right, not just pointing and shooting. I used to love photography, before everything else took over. You should do it more." "When?" "Now, for instance." He gestured at the exhibit, at Maya, at the whole ridiculous, beautiful chaos of the zoo. "When else are you going to remember this?" He was right. She took more pictures, some of Evan, some of the penguins, one of Caleb teaching Maya how to read the information plaque, even though she clearly already knew everything on it. She took pictures like evidence, like proof that she'd been here, that this had happened, that for one morning she'd been a person who went to zoos instead of board meetings. The tiger exhibit proved more complicated because Evan chose that moment to have a diaper situation that required retreat to the family bathroom and complete outfit change. Lillian handled it with the grim efficiency of someone who'd learned through trial and fire, emerging victorious if somewhat disheveled. "You're getting good at that," Caleb observed. "High-pressure negotiations prepared me for bodily fluids. Who knew?" Maya giggled. "You said bodily fluids. That's the scientific term." "It's also funny." They saw the tiger, which was indeed excellent, and the elephants and the orangutans who reminded Lillian uncomfortably of board meetings. By lunchtime, everyone was hungry, and Evan was getting fussy, and Maya's enthusiasm had finally hit diminishing returns. They found a picnic area, and Caleb unpacked sandwiches he'd apparently made that morning, turkey and cheese for Maya, something that involved pesto for the adults, juice boxes all around. It was so aggressively normal that Lillian felt tears threaten again. "You okay?" Caleb asked quietly while Maya fed pieces of her sandwich to imaginary birds. "Fine, just... This is nice." "It's a zoo, with crowds and overpriced everything, and Maya's going to crash hard in about an hour." "Still nice." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, it is." They ate in comfortable silence, punctuated by Maya's running commentary on the people around them. Evan dozed in his stroller, finally relaxed after the morning's excitement. The sun was warm but not oppressive. Somewhere nearby, a child was having a meltdown about ice cream, and Lillian felt grateful it wasn't Evan for once. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said after a while. "Sure." "Why'd you really want to do this today? I mean, you're here for work, you closed a huge deal yesterday, you've got a company to run, but you're spending your Friday at a zoo with people you barely know." Lillian watched Maya chase a pigeon, watched Evan sleep, watched the chaos of normal life happening all around them. "Because I don't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to," she said finally. "Everything in my life is optimized, scheduled, purposeful. Even Evan, I mean, I love him, but he was planned, timed for the right career moment, between funding rounds, after the IPO. And I hate that I just said that about my own son." "But you did say it. That's honest." "Honest and horrible." "No, honest and human." Caleb leaned back, eyes on Maya. "You know what Sarah said when she got diagnosed? She said, thank God we had Maya young and stupid, because if we'd waited until we were ready, we never would have had her at all. Sometimes the unplanned things are the best things." "Was Maya unplanned?" "Completely. Sarah was 23. I was 25. We'd been married 6 months. I was deployed. She called and told me over a satellite phone in the middle of nowhere, and I dropped the phone and my sergeant thought I'd been shot." He smiled at the memory. "But we figured it out. You do, when you have to." "I don't know if I'm figuring it out." "You're here, aren't you? You showed up on a plane, you're showing up now. That's what figuring it out looks like." Maya ran back, breathless. "Daddy, can we go see the farm animals, please? I want Lillian to meet the goats. They're so funny. We've been here 3 hours, Bug. You're going to be exhausted." "I'm not tired at all." Caleb looked at Lillian, eyebrows raised in question. "Goats sound great," Lillian said. The farm area was smaller, quieter, a petting zoo set up with goats and sheep and chickens wandering around looking vaguely annoyed by human attention. Maya immediately joined a crowd of kids feeding pellets to a particularly aggressive goat, while Caleb and Lillian hung back with Evan, who was awake and watching everything with his usual serious intensity. "You're good with her," Lillian said. "With Maya. She's really whole, considering. She has bad days. Sometimes she cries about missing Sarah. Sometimes she gets angry that her mom isn't at school events like other kids' moms. Sometimes she asks questions I don't know how to answer." He paused. "But mostly, she's okay. Kids are resilient like that, more than adults." "How did you do it? Keep going after Sarah died?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, watching his daughter laugh as a goat tried to eat her shoelace. "I didn't have a choice," he said finally. "Maya needed breakfast and lunch and dinner. She needed someone to sign permission slips and wash her favorite shirt and tell her bedtime stories. So I did that. Every day, I just did the next thing. And eventually doing the next thing became living again. That's simple? That hard. Simple and hard aren't opposites." Lillian absorbed this, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle piece that might fit somewhere she hadn't looked yet. "I'm afraid I'm messing him up," she heard herself say. "Evan, I'm afraid he's going to grow up and realize his mother never figured out how to be present, that she was always somewhere else, even when she was right there. You think I don't worry about the same thing? You're doing amazing." Caleb laughed, bitter, surprised. "Lillian, half the time I'm making it up as I go. I burned dinner 3 times this week. I forgot Maya's show and tell yesterday and had to convince her that bringing a wrench was actually cooler than whatever the other kids brought. I fall asleep during bedtime stories because I'm so tired I can barely see straight. Amazing is a stretch. But you love her. That's obvious. And you love Evan. That's obvious too. Love doesn't mean you have all the answers. It means you keep showing up to find them. Evan grabbed Lillian's finger, holding tight with that reflexive baby grip that always felt like a promise. She looked at her son, this tiny person who'd rearranged her entire world, and felt the fear loosen its hold just slightly. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect. Maybe she just had to be here. Maya came running back, a goat following her hopefully. That one thinks I have more food. Can we give him more? Please? They spent another 20 minutes in the farm area, feeding goats and chickens and watching Evan's eyes go wide at the sheer chaos of animals and children and life happening everywhere at once. Then Maya crashed, exactly as Caleb predicted, sudden and total, leaning against his leg while insisting she wasn't tired at all. Time to go, Bug. But we didn't see the bears. Next time. Promise? Promise. They walked back to the truck, Maya dragging her feet but not actually complaining, Evan asleep again in Lillian's arms. The parking lot felt too bright after the shaded paths, too real, like emerging from a dream into something harsher. Caleb loaded everyone in, and they drove back toward the city in sleepy silence. Maya dozed in her booster. Evan slept curled against Lillian's chest, and Lillian watched Seattle slide past, feeling something she couldn't name. Not quite happiness, not quite peace, but something adjacent to both. Thank you for today, she said quietly. Caleb glanced at her in the rear view. You keep thanking me. You know that? Because you keep helping. Or maybe we're just spending time together, and that doesn't require payment or gratitude. Maybe it's just nice. The word hung in the air, too small for what Lillian was feeling, too simple for the complicated tangle of emotions that had been building since that first moment on the plane, but also exactly right. When they reached her hotel, Caleb put the truck in park but didn't kill the engine. The moment stretched, not awkward, just full, like something was shifting and neither of them knew quite what to call it yet. What time's your flight tomorrow? He asked. 2. What, busy morning? Nothing I can't cancel. The words came out before she'd consciously decided to say them, and Caleb's expression shifted. Surprise, pleasure, something else she couldn't read. We're making pancakes in the morning, he said. Maya's specialty. Well, my specialty, but she cracks the eggs and thinks that makes her the chef. You and Evan want to join? Every rational part of Lillian's brain said no. She had emails to answer, calls to make, a company that needed her attention. She'd already spent more time away from work than she had in years. This was inefficient, impractical, the kind of indulgence she couldn't afford. Yes, she said. What time? 8? Too early? I'm usually up by 6. Of course you are. But he was smiling. I'll text you the address. Lillian unbuckled Evan, gathered the diaper bag, and climbed out of the truck. Maya stirred enough to wave sleepily. Caleb leaned out the window, and for a second Lillian thought he might say something more, something significant, something that would define whatever this was becoming. But he just said, See you tomorrow, Lillian. Tomorrow. She watched them drive away, standing in the hotel circle like someone who'd forgotten where she was supposed to go next. Around her, business travelers rushed past with rolling suitcases and urgent expressions, heading to meetings and conferences and all the important things that supposedly mattered. Lillian held her sleeping son and tried to remember why any of that had ever felt urgent at all. Upstairs, her phone was exploding. 17 new emails, 4 missed calls. Marcus demanding to know why she wasn't responding about Tokyo. The board wanting updates. Investors needing reassurance about quarterly projections. She put the phone on silent, fed Evan when he woke up, and spent the evening just being. No laptop, no spreadsheets, no optimization. Just her and her son, watching bad TV and eating room service she actually tasted, existing in a way she'd forgotten was possible. At 9, she called Marcus. Where have you been? He demanded. I've been trying to reach you all day. I was busy. Busy with what? The Seattle deal's closed. You should be wheels up and back here already. I'm staying another day. Silence. Then carefully, why? Lillian looked at Evan, asleep in his crib, small chest rising and falling with perfect trust that the world would keep him safe. Because I want to, she said. More silence. She could practically hear Marcus recalculating, trying to understand this deviation from protocol. Are you okay? He asked finally. I don't know, maybe. I think I'm trying to be. That's cryptic. I know. I'm sorry. Listen, handle Tokyo without me for now. Push the timeline if you need to. I trust your judgment. Lillian, what's going on? I met someone. The words came out wrong, too significant, too loaded. She rushed to clarify. Not like that, just someone who's showing me that my life doesn't have to be the way I've been living it, that there are other options. Options for what? Everything. She could feel Marcus struggling to understand, to fit this into his framework of who Lillian Drake was and what she cared about. But that was the problem. She'd been fitting herself into everyone's framework for so long she'd forgotten what her own looked like. Okay, Marcus said slowly. Take your extra day. But we need to talk when you get back. Really talk. About what you want, what you need, about whether you're happy. When did happiness become part of the equation? It's always been part of the equation. You just stopped checking that box. After they hung up, Lillian sat in the dark hotel room and let herself feel everything she'd been pushing down for years. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the creeping suspicion that she'd built an empire but lost herself somewhere in the foundation. She'd been so busy proving everyone wrong, proving she could be a CEO and a mother, that she could have it all and do it perfectly. That she'd never stopped to ask if this was what she actually wanted. Or if maybe, just maybe, there was another way. Tomorrow, she'd go to Caleb's house. She'd eat pancakes with a widower and his daughter. She'd be a person instead of a position, a human instead of a headline. And maybe, just maybe, she'd start figuring out who Lillian Drake was when no one was watching. Caleb's house was nothing like what Lillian expected, though she wasn't sure what she'd been expecting. Something modest, probably. Humble. The kind of place that apologized for itself before you walked through the door. But the address led her to a craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood where trees lined the streets and kids actually played outside. The house itself was small but cared for. Fresh paint, flower boxes under the windows, a porch with 2 rocking chairs that looked used. Not magazine perfect, just lived in and loved. Lillian sat in the Uber for a full minute before getting out, Evan awake and babbling in her arms. She could still leave. Text an excuse. Return to the safety of hotels and airports and the life she understood. But Maya appeared on the porch, waving frantically, those light-up shoes flashing even in morning sun. Lillian, you came. Daddy said you might not, but I knew you would. Come see my room. I cleaned it and everything. No escape now. Lillian paid the driver, gathered Evan and the diaper bag, and walked up the path feeling like she was approaching something far more significant than breakfast. The front door was open, screen door the only barrier, and through it she could smell coffee and something sweet. Caleb appeared behind Maya, flower on his shirt, hair slightly disheveled in a way that shouldn't have been attractive but somehow was. Morning, he said. Fair warning, the kitchen's a disaster and Maya's definition of helping involves mostly eating batter. I'm quality control, Maya protested. Your trouble. Same thing. They pulled Lillian inside into a living room that was cluttered in the best possible way. Books stacked on every surface. Maya's artwork covering the walls. A coffee table with ring stains and crayon marks. Photos everywhere, Caleb and Maya, and a woman who must have been Sarah, all of them laughing in various locations, frozen in moments that had mattered enough to frame. Lillian felt like she'd walked into someone's actual life instead of the carefully curated version people usually displayed. Sorry about the mess, Caleb said, moving to clear space. I meant to clean up more, but Maya distracted me with urgent matters involving her dollhouse. There was a crisis, Maya confirmed seriously. The furniture was all wrong. Naturally. Caleb looked at Lillian, something uncertain in his expression. You can put Evan down anywhere. There's a playmat in the corner if you want. I saved it from Maya's baby days. Probably still has drool stains. Daddy? What? You were a very drooly baby. Lillian set Evan on the playmat, and he immediately grabbed for a toy that rattled, fascinated, safe, content. She straightened and found Caleb watching her with that steady attention that always made her feel seen in ways she wasn't sure she was ready for. "Coffee?" he offered. "Please." The kitchen was indeed a disaster, mixing bowls everywhere, eggshells on the counter, flour-dusting surfaces like snow. But it smelled like vanilla and warmth, and there was something deeply appealing about the chaos of it all. Caleb poured coffee into a mug that said "World's Okayest Dad" and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed. It shouldn't have felt like anything. It felt like everything. "Maya, you ready to show off your skills?" Caleb asked. "Yes." Maya scrambled onto a step stool at the counter. "Lillian, watch this. I'm really good." What followed was less cooking than performance art. Maya cracked eggs with intense concentration, only getting shells in the bowl twice. She measured flour by dumping it vaguely near a measuring cup. She stirred with the enthusiasm of someone trying to beat the batter into submission. And Caleb led her. He stood behind her, guiding without controlling, praising effort over results, cleaning up the worst disasters without making her feel bad about creating them. It was patient and messy and completely opposed to every parenting book Lillian had read about building competence through structure. But Maya was glowing, confident, happy. "You're really good at this," Lillian said to Caleb quietly. "At pancakes. At letting her be a kid." He glanced at her, then back to Maya, who was now arguing with herself about whether the batter needed more vanilla. "Sarah used to say the same thing," he said, "that I was too relaxed about everything. But I saw what perfectionism did to my parents. My dad was Navy, and nothing was ever good enough. I didn't want that for Maya. I wanted her to know that trying was more important than succeeding." My mother would have a stroke hearing that philosophy. "Your mother sounds exhausting." "She is, but she also graduated top of her class at Yale Law and made partner by 35, so there's that." "At what cost?" The question landed hard. Lillian thought about her childhood, the private schools, the test prep, the constant pressure to achieve, the absence of joy in favor of excellence, the way her mother had looked at her when she dropped out of college, like Lillian had personally betrayed every sacrifice she'd ever made. "A pretty high one," Lillian admitted. Maya waved a spatula for attention. "Okay, the batter's ready. Now we cook them. Daddy, can I flip?" "Let's start with me flipping and you watching." "But I'm 7 now. I'm basically grown up." "You're basically going to burn yourself. Watch first." Caleb poured batter onto the griddle with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 Saturday mornings. The pancakes sizzled, filling the kitchen with that smell that somehow meant weekend and family and all the things Lillian's childhood had lacked. She watched him work, efficient but unhurried, teaching Maya timing and temperature without lectures, letting her ask questions instead of forcing information. It was education disguised as breakfast, and Maya had no idea she was learning. "You want to try?" Caleb asked Lillian. "Try what?" "Flipping. You look like someone who's never flipped a pancake." "I flip pancakes." "When?" She tried to remember, couldn't. "Okay, fine. Never." "Then get over here." He handed her the spatula, positioned her at the griddle, and stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. Close enough that Maya giggled and said something about Daddy having a friend that made Caleb tell her to hush. "It's all in the wrist," he said, his hand covering hers on the spatula. "See the bubbles? That's your signal. Quick motion, confident, not timid. Like you mean it." Lillian flipped. The pancake went sideways, nearly off the griddle entirely, and Caleb caught it with his own spatula, laughing. Okay, that was confident bordering on violent. "I don't do things halfway." "Clearly, try again. Less force, more finesse." The second attempt was better. The third actually worked. By the fourth, Lillian was flipping pancakes like someone who'd discovered a skill she didn't know she needed but suddenly couldn't imagine living without. "You're a natural," Maya declared. "Can you teach my daddy? He flips too slow." "I flip at exactly the right speed. You flip like a grandpa." "I'm 36. That's not old. It's pretty old." They ate at a small kitchen table that barely fit 4 people, plates stacked with pancakes that were various degrees of golden and perfectly imperfect. Maya drowned hers in syrup. Caleb ate his plain. Lillian tried hers with butter and discovered that pancakes made with someone you cared about tasted better than anything she'd eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants. Evan sat in a borrowed high chair, gumming a piece of banana and looking delighted about everything. So what's Portland like? Maya asked suddenly. Where your mama lives. Rainy, pretty, has good bookstores. Do you visit a lot? Not really. Why not? Lillian felt Caleb's eyes on her, patient but present, waiting to see how she'd answer his daughter's two perceptive questions. We don't always get along, Lillian said carefully. Sometimes families are complicated. Like when you love someone but they make you mad? Exactly like that. I get mad at Daddy sometimes, Maya offered. Like when he makes me go to bed when I'm not even tired, but I still love him. Even when I'm being unreasonable? Caleb asked. Especially then. That's when you need love most. That's what Dr. Chen says. Dr. Chen's very wise. I know. I told her that. Maya took another bite, chewed thoughtfully. You should visit your mama more, even if she's complicated, because what if something happens and then you didn't? The weight of unspoken grief hung in that statement. This child who'd learned too young that time wasn't guaranteed, that putting things off meant risking never at all. You're right, Lillian said, throat tight. I should. After breakfast, Maya insisted on showing Lillian her room, a small space painted purple, covered in posters of animals and space and whatever 7-year-olds currently thought was cool. The dollhouse that had required emergency intervention sat in the corner, and Maya proceeded to explain the entire complex drama of its residents with the intensity of someone recounting a prestige television series. Lillian sat on the floor, Evan in her lap, and listened. Really listened. Not waiting for her turn to talk, not thinking about what came next, just being present in this moment with this child who decided they were friends. That's Mama, Maya said suddenly, pointing to a photo on her nightstand. A woman with dark hair and bright eyes, holding a baby Maya, looking at the camera like whoever was behind it was her whole world. She was really pretty. She was beautiful. Daddy cries sometimes when he looks at pictures. He tries to hide it, but I know. It's okay, though. Dr. Chen says crying means you loved someone big. Your Dr. Chen is very smart. I told you. Maya picked up the photo, studied it. I don't remember her voice anymore. That makes me sad. Daddy plays videos sometimes so I can hear it, but it's not the same as remembering on my own. Lillian felt tears burning. This child's matter-of-fact grief, the way she'd integrated loss into her daily life without being consumed by it, was somehow more devastating than if she'd been wailing. I bet she was proud of you, Lillian said. Daddy says she would be, that she'd love how good I am at reading and how I'm nice to kids at school who don't have friends. Maya looked up. Do you think people in heaven can see us? I think if anyone can, it's mothers watching their kids. Maya smiled, satisfied with this answer. That's what I think, too. They went back downstairs to find Caleb washing dishes, Evan now in a baby bouncer on the floor, kicking his legs happily. He looked up when they entered, soap suds on his hands, and something in his expression shifted when he saw Lillian's face. You okay? He asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Maya show you her room. And her dollhouse. There's a lot of drama in that house. The Hendersons are going through a rough patch, Maya explained seriously. They need marriage counseling, but they're too proud to ask. Caleb laughed. Where does she get this stuff? TV, Maya said. And listening when you think I'm asleep. We're working on boundaries, Caleb told Lillian. They spent the rest of the morning in comfortable chaos. Maya wanted to play a board game that made no logical sense but involved a lot of enthusiasm. Evan needed changing and feeding and entertaining. Caleb made more coffee. Lillian took pictures of everything. Maya concentrating on her game pieces. Evan staring at his own fist like it held cosmic secrets. Caleb looking at his daughter with such pure love it hurt to witness. Around noon, Maya crashed exactly as predicted, falling asleep on the couch mid-sentence. Caleb covered her with a blanket, and suddenly the house was quiet except for Evan's soft breathing and the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere. She runs on pure energy until she doesn't, Caleb said, sitting next to Lillian. Not touching, but close. Then it's like someone cut her power cord. She's amazing. She's everything. He paused. Sarah would have loved this, you being here, Maya having someone new to talk to. Sarah always said the house was too quiet with just the two of us. 3 of you. Yeah. He looked at Evan, asleep now in Lillian's arms. 3. Until it wasn't. Lillian didn't know what to say to that. Every platitude felt empty. So she just sat there, letting the silence hold what words couldn't. I wasn't ready, Caleb said after a while. When Sarah died, I thought she was sick for 18 months. We knew it was coming, but knowing doesn't prepare you. Nothing prepares you for the moment when the person who was your whole world just stops. How did you survive it? Maya, she needed breakfast the next morning, needed someone to get her to school, pick her up, make dinner. The grief was enormous, but the tasks were small. So I focused on the tasks, made sandwiches, signed permission slips, showed up to parent-teacher conferences. And somewhere in all those small tasks, I found reasons to keep breathing. He looked at Lillian then, really looked at her, and she felt seen in ways that terrified her. You're running, he said. Not accusing, just observing. From what? From whatever it is that scares you about stopping, about being still, about admitting that maybe the life you built isn't the life you want. Lillian's first instinct was to deny it, to pull out her armor, cite her achievements, prove that her life was exactly what she'd chosen. But sitting in this lived-in house with a man who'd survived the worst life could throw at him, the lies felt impossible to maintain. I don't know how to be a person anymore, she said quietly. I know how to be a CEO, how to close deals and motivate teams and make impossible things happen. But just existing. Being someone's mother without turning it into a project. I don't know how to do that. You're doing it right now. This doesn't count. This is borrowed time. Tomorrow I go back to reality. Why? Because I have a company, responsibilities, people depending on me. And what about him? Caleb nodded at Evan. What about you? Who's taking care of those dependencies? The question landed like a punch. Lillian looked at her son, this tiny person who'd rearranged her entire universe, and felt the weight of everything she'd been avoiding. I don't know if I can do both, she admitted. Be the CEO they need and the mother he deserves. Everyone says you can have it all, but what if you can't? What if trying to do everything means failing at everything? Who says you're failing? Everyone. The way people look at me when Evan cries on planes, my board when I ask for flexibility, Marcus when I suggest that maybe we don't need to expand into Tokyo right this second. Even Evan, the way he settled with you and not with me, like he knows. Lillian, Caleb shifted closer, his voice firm. That baby loves you. You're his whole world. The fact that he also responded to someone else doesn't diminish that. It just means babies are human beings who respond to different people in different ways. But you're so good at it. I've been doing it for 7 years. You've been doing it for 7 months. Cut yourself some slack. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. That's what this is. He gestured at the house, at Maya sleeping, at the mess of life everywhere. Learning how to be human instead of perfect. Learning that failing sometimes is part of succeeding at life. Lillian felt tears coming and couldn't stop them this time. They came quiet but persistent, sliding down her face while she held her sleeping son and felt the foundations of her carefully constructed identity cracking. Caleb didn't try to fix it, didn't offer tissues or platitudes or solutions, just sat there, steady as always, letting her fall apart without making it mean she was broken. I'm sorry, she managed. For what? For crying in your house, for being a mess, but you're not a mess, you're a human being having human feelings. That's allowed. Not in my world. Then maybe your world needs to change. The words hung there, simple and impossible and terrifying in their truth. Maya stirred on the couch, mumbling something about penguins before settling again. The moment shifted, became something else. Caleb stood, offered his hand to help Lillian up. Come on, I want to show you something. He led her out the back door, into a yard that was small but cared for. There was a garden in the corner, vegetables and herbs growing in neat rows. A playset that had seen better days but still worked, and in the middle of it all, a half-finished deck, wood stacked nearby, tools laid out with the organization of someone who knew their craft. Sarah wanted a deck, Caleb said. Spent her last months planning it, where we'd put furniture, what kind of wood. She never got to see it finished. So I'm building it now, been working on it weekends, whenever Maya's occupied. It's slow going. It's beautiful. It's functional, but it's mine. The one project I'm doing just because I want to, not because it pays the bills or impresses anyone. Just because Sarah wanted it, and now I do too. He picked up a piece of sandpaper, ran it along a board with practice strokes. My point is, he continued, we all need something that's just ours. Something we do because it feeds us, not because it serves a purpose. You lost that somewhere. The photography you mentioned. The parts of you that existed before you became Lillian Drake, CEO. I don't remember who that person was. Then maybe it's time to find out. Lillian watched him work for a moment, the way his hands moved with confidence and care, building something that mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with profit or performance. What if I don't like who I find, she asked. Then you'll know that too. But I'm betting you'll be surprised. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably Marcus again, or the board, or any of the 100 fires that always needed putting out. She ignored it. For the first time in years, she ignored it. My flight's at 2, she said. I know. I should probably head back to the hotel. Pack. Prepare. Probably. Neither of them moved. Inside, Evan started fussing. Lillian went to him, picked him up, brought him outside where the afternoon sun was warm and the air smelled like fresh-cut wood and growing things. Caleb kept working, and Maya eventually appeared, sleepy and grumpy until she saw the deck progress and insisted on helping. They spent another hour like that, Caleb building, Maya helping, Lillian sitting in the grass with Evan, taking pictures she'd probably never show anyone, but would look at when she needed to remember that this had been real. At 1, Caleb drove them back to the hotel. Maya chattered the whole way about when Lillian would visit again, making plans with the confidence of someone who assumed friendship was permanent. Lillian didn't have the heart to explain that she lived in San Francisco, that her life didn't include regular trips to Seattle, that this had been a beautiful anomaly in an otherwise relentless schedule. At the hotel entrance, they said goodbye in the circle where they'd met just yesterday morning, though it felt like years had passed. Thank you, Lillian said, knowing the words weren't enough. For everything. The zoo, the pancakes, just letting me exist in your lives for a bit. You're welcome any time, Caleb said, and meant it. Really, Maya's already planning what we'll do next time. Next time. The words felt like a promise and a question all at once. Maya hugged her fiercely. Bye, Lillian. Bye, Evan. Don't forget about us, okay? I won't, Lillian said, and knew it was true. These people had carved themselves into her life in 2 days, had shown her possibilities she'd stopped believing in. There was no forgetting that. She watched them drive away, standing in the same spot she'd stood yesterday. But everything felt different now. She felt different, like someone had reached into her chest and adjusted something fundamental, and now the world didn't fit quite the same way it had before. Upstairs, she packed mechanically, checked her email mechanically, confirmed her Uber mechanically. Everything felt muted, distant, like she was operating from very far away. The flight home was unremarkable. Evan slept most of the way. No one stared at her. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. San Francisco welcomed her back with fog and traffic and the immediate resumption of everything she'd briefly escaped. Marcus met her at her apartment with files and updates and 17 things that needed her immediate attention. How was Seattle? He asked. Productive. Just productive? Lillian looked at him, her co-founder, her friend, the person who knew her best in all the ways that mattered professionally. But he didn't know about Caleb or Maya or the pancakes or the way she'd cried in a stranger's living room because she'd finally admitted she was drowning. Yeah, she said, just productive. But that night, after Marcus left and Evan was asleep, and she was alone with her thoughts in her expensive apartment that felt more like a museum than a home, Lillian opened her photos. The penguins, the pancakes, Maya's dollhouse, Caleb building his deck. Evidence that for 48 hours she'd been someone different, someone lighter, someone who could exist without achieving. She stared at those photos until her eyes burned, trying to figure out how to bring that person home. The first week back was brutal. Not because of the work, Lillian had handled worse with less sleep, but because everything felt wrong now. like she'd put on a jacket that used to fit perfectly and discovered it was suddenly 3 sizes too small and cutting off circulation. She sat in board meetings and heard herself talking about growth projections while thinking about Maya's light-up shoes. She reviewed contracts and remembered the way Caleb's hands had moved while building that deck, creating something just because it mattered. She gave a presentation to investors about the Tokyo expansion and felt like a fraud, performing a role she'd once believed in but couldn't quite sell anymore. Marcus noticed first. "You're different," he said, after a particularly lifeless pitch to a potential partner. They'd gotten the deal anyway because the numbers were solid, but Lillian's usual fire had been conspicuously absent. "I'm tired." "You're always tired. This is something else." She wanted to tell him, wanted to explain about the plane and the penguins and the pancakes and the way 2 days in Seattle had fundamentally rearranged her understanding of what mattered. But the words felt impossible to translate into the language Marcus spoke, the language of quarterly earnings and competitive advantage and building something that lasted. "I'm fine," she said instead, "just need to adjust." But she wasn't adjusting. She was suffocating. Every night, she'd put Evan to bed and then stare at her phone, thumb hovering over Caleb's contact. She'd type messages and delete them. "Hey, how's Maya?" Too casual. "I've been thinking about Seattle." Too revealing. "I don't know how to do this anymore." Too honest. She never sent anything. Caleb texted first 10 days after she'd left. "Maya wanted me to tell you she finished a book about penguins. She now knows 17 additional penguin facts. You've been warned." Lillian stared at the message for 5 minutes before responding. "That's terrifying. Please tell her I'm impressed and also scared." "She says you should come back so she can educate you properly. Also, there's a new tiger at the zoo." A tempting offer. Is it, though? The question sat there on her screen, deceptively simple. Was it tempting, or was it terrifying? Or were those the same thing? "I don't know," she typed, then stared at it for another 3 minutes before hitting send. "That's honest. I'll take it." They texted sporadically after that. Nothing deep, just small updates about daily life. Maya's school projects, Evan's new fascination with his feet, the deck Caleb was still building. Surface-level stuff that somehow felt more substantial than most of Lillian's actual conversations. But it wasn't enough. 3 weeks after Seattle, Lillian sat in her office at midnight, Evan asleep in the portable crib she'd set up because she'd been working too late to go home, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt genuinely happy. Not accomplished, not successful, not validated, just happy. The realization hit like physical pain. She pulled out her phone, opened her photos, and scrolled through the Seattle pictures. Found the one of Caleb and Maya at the zoo, both of them laughing at something the penguins had done. Studied their faces, the unguarded joy, the ease of people who'd figured out how to be present instead of always chasing the next achievement. She wanted that. Not their life specifically. She didn't want to be a widow raising a child alone. But she wanted whatever it was they had that she'd lost. The ability to exist without performing, to be enough without constantly proving it. Her phone rang. Marcus, even though he'd left the office hours ago. "Don't kill me," he said without preamble. "Why would I kill you?" "Because I'm about to say something you don't want to hear." Lillian closed her laptop, suddenly exhausted. "Go ahead." "You're miserable, have been since Seattle, and before you argue, I've known you for 12 years. I know what happy Lillian looks like. And this isn't it." She wanted to deny it. Couldn't. "What's your point?" she asked instead. "My point is that I watched you build this company because you loved it, because you couldn't not build it. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being the thing you loved and started being the thing you felt obligated to maintain. And that's not sustainable." "What are you suggesting? That I quit?" "I'm suggesting you figure out what you actually want instead of what you think you're supposed to want." He paused. "Whatever happened in Seattle, it shifted something. You came back different. Maybe it's time to listen to that instead of pushing through it." After they hung up, Lillian sat in the dark office and let herself think the thoughts she'd been avoiding. She didn't want to be CEO anymore. Or maybe she did, but not like this. Not every waking hour, not at the expense of everything else, not in a way that meant Evan grew up with a mother who was always somewhere else, even when she was right there. But admitting that felt like admitting failure, like proving right everyone who'd ever doubted her, who'd said she couldn't have both, who'd watched her try to balance motherhood and career with barely concealed schadenfreude, waiting for the inevitable collapse. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Maya. Daddy doesn't know I have his phone. Can you come visit? He's sad. He tries to hide it, but I know. He likes you. I like you too. Evan can come. We have a yard. Okay, bye." Lillian stared at the message, something cracking wider in her chest. This 7-year-old who saw through her father's defenses, who decided Lillian was worth keeping, who asked for what she wanted with the straightforward honesty of someone who'd learned that time wasn't guaranteed. She looked at Evan, asleep in his crib, one small fist curled against his cheek. Looked at her office with its awards and accolades and evidence of everything she'd achieved. Looked at her phone with Maya's message still glowing. Then she made a decision that felt both reckless and overdue. She called Marcus back. "Remember how you said I should figure out what I want?" That was 10 minutes ago, so yes. "I want to step back. Not quit, but delegate. Let you and Chen handle day-to-day operations. I'll stay on the board, handle big-picture strategy, but I can't do this anymore. The 80-hour weeks, the constant travel, the feeling like I'm failing at everything because I'm stretched too thin." Silence. Then quietly, "Okay. Okay. Lillian, I've been waiting for you to say that for 6 months. You're brilliant, but you're burning out. And the company needs you thinking clearly more than it needs you present constantly. The board will lose their minds. Let them. We'll frame it as strategic evolution, transitioning to a more advisory role as the company matures. They'll either accept it or we'll deal with the fallout. But you can't keep doing this." Relief hit so hard Lillian almost couldn't breathe. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just figure out what makes you happy. Then do that." She knew what made her happy. She'd known since Seattle. She'd just been too scared to admit it. The next morning, Lillian called her assistant and cleared her schedule for the following week. Then she booked 2 tickets to Seattle, her and Evan. Then she texted Caleb before she could overthink it. "Maya texted me from your phone. She's very persuasive. Would it be weird if Evan and I came to visit? Staying for a week this time. I'll get a hotel. Won't impose. Just, I'd like to see you both. If that's okay." She sent it and immediately wanted to unsend it. It was too much. Too fast. Too revealing. He'd think she was crazy or desperate or... Her phone rang. "Caleb." "Hi," he said, and even through the phone she could hear the smile in his voice. "Hi. So that text was probably too much, and I totally understand if..." "Lillian." "Yeah?" "Stop spiraling. It's not too much. And you're not getting a hotel. You and Evan will stay here. Maya will lose her mind with excitement. She's been asking about you constantly. I don't want to impose." "You're not. And honestly, I've been wanting to call you for weeks, just didn't know if I should. If that would be, I don't know, overstepping." Something warm spread through Lillian's chest. "You've been wanting to call me?" "Yeah. Turns out 48 hours was not enough time with you. Who knew?" "Caleb, just come to Seattle, Lillian. We'll figure out the rest." She arrived on a Wednesday morning, Evan on her hip and 1 suitcase that she'd packed and repacked 5 times. Caleb picked them up at the airport, and the smile on his face when he saw them made every anxious second of the flight worth it. Maya was at school, but she'd left a welcome sign taped to the front door. "Lillian and Evan, welcome! Love, Maya," decorated with approximately 1 million stickers. "She started on that 3 days ago," Caleb said, carrying Lillian's suitcase inside. "Every night more stickers. I was running out of them." The house felt different in daylight, more lived in and somehow more welcoming. Caleb showed her to the guest room, small but clean, with a crib already set up for Evan. "When did you do this?" Lillian asked. "Last night. Had to dig it out of storage, clean it up. Figured Evan would need somewhere to sleep." The thoughtfulness of it hit her sideways. This man who barely knew her had spent his evening preparing for her son, anticipating needs she hadn't even articulated. "Thank you," she managed. "It's just a crib." "It's not just a crib." He looked at her then, really looked, and something passed between them that didn't need words. Understanding, maybe. recognition. The acknowledgement that this was about more than logistics, that they were both standing at the edge of something significant and scary, and neither of them quite knew how to name it yet. "I'm glad you're here," he said finally. "Me too." Maya's reaction when she got home from school was everything Caleb had promised, pure, unfiltered joy. She hugged Lillian like they'd been separated for years instead of weeks, then insisted on showing Evan every toy in her room despite the baby having no idea what was happening. That first evening felt surreal. They made dinner together, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and salad, but it felt momentous somehow. Lillian chopped vegetables while Caleb cooked pasta, and Maya set the table with the gravity of someone handling state secrets. They ate and talked and laughed, and Evan sat in his high chair making a spectacular mess, and it was so normal it hurt. This was what she'd been missing. Not perfection. The spaghetti was slightly overcooked, and Maya spilled her water twice, and Evan needed 3 outfit changes. But presence. Connection. The messy, imperfect reality of people choosing to be together. After dinner, after baths and bedtime stories, and the organized chaos of getting 2 kids settled, Lillian found herself on the back porch with Caleb, both of them holding beers and looking at his half-finished deck. "I made some progress," he said, pointing to new sections. "Still got a ways to go." "Why do it yourself? You could hire someone, get it done faster." "Because it's not about getting it done. It's about building something that matters with my own hands. Doing it right, not fast." Lillian thought about her company, built on speed and disruption, and getting to market first, about how that philosophy had served her professionally but left her personal life barren. "I think I've been doing everything fast my whole life," she said. Never stopped to ask if fast was actually better. "Is it?" "No, I don't think it is." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only happens between people who've decided they don't need to fill every gap with words. "Why'd you really come back?" Caleb asked eventually. Lillian took a breath. "Because I've been miserable since I left. Because I can't stop thinking about the 2 days I spent here and how they were the only time in years I felt like an actual human being. Because Maya texted me that you were sad, and I realized I was sad too, and maybe we could be less sad together." "Maya texted you?" "From your phone. She's very concerned about your emotional well-being." Caleb groaned. "I'm going to have a serious conversation with that child about boundaries." "Please don't. It was the push I needed." He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted, softened. "I have been sad. Missing Sarah's always there, but it's been worse lately. Because for 48 hours, I remembered what it felt like to talk to someone who got it, who understood that life is complicated and messy and you're just doing your best." "I'm not doing my best. I'm barely holding it together." "Same thing." "Is it?" "Yeah, Lillian, it is." The week unfolded in ways she hadn't anticipated. Not dramatic or romantic or anything resembling a movie. Just life. Real, mundane, beautiful life. She and Caleb fell into a rhythm. Mornings making breakfast together, days exploring Seattle, or staying home while Maya was at school. Evenings that became a chaos of dinner and homework and bath time. Lillian helped Maya with a science project about ocean currents. Caleb taught her how to use his power tools, laughing when she approached carpentry with the same intensity she brought to board meetings. They took turns with night wakings when Evan was fussy, passing each other in the hallway at 2 a.m. like ships in the night, both exhausted but somehow less alone. And slowly, without either of them quite acknowledging it, they were building something. Maya noticed first, of course. "Are you going to be my new mom?" she asked one morning at breakfast, the question delivered with the casual directness of someone who didn't understand why adults complicated everything. Lillian choked on her coffee. Caleb went very still. Evan, oblivious, threw Cheerios on the floor with systematic determination. "Maya, we're not..." Caleb struggled. "I don't need a new mom," Maya continued, undeterred. "I have a mom. She's in heaven. But Daddy needs someone, and you need someone, and I like you and Evan's cool, so I was just wondering." Out of the mouths of children came truth too big to ignore. Lillian looked at Caleb, who looked back at her with an expression that said, "Help and sorry." And is she wrong, though? All at once. "Maya," Lillian said carefully, "your dad and I are friends. really good friends, and I care about you a lot. But these things are complicated for grown-ups. Why? Because Lillian stopped. Why were they complicated? Because she lived in San Francisco? Because she had a company to run? Because letting herself want this felt dangerous? Or because she'd spent so long protecting herself that the idea of being vulnerable terrified her? Because we're figuring it out, Caleb said, saving her. And figuring things out takes time. Okay, Maya said, apparently satisfied. But you should figure it out fast because you're both old and don't have that much time. I'm 36, Caleb protested, which is old. After Maya left for school, Lillian and Caleb stood in the kitchen, the question hanging between them like humidity. Sorry about that, Caleb said. She has no filter. She's not wrong, though. About us being old? About us needing to figure this out. Lillian set down her coffee cup, heart hammering. Caleb, I don't know what this is, but I know I haven't been this happy in years, and I know that going back to San Francisco without you and Maya sounds unbearable. And I know that's probably too much, too fast, and I'm terrifying you. He kissed her. Not dramatic or planned or anything resembling a romance novel, just a simple, honest kiss that tasted like coffee and felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Caleb was smiling. You weren't terrifying me. You were saying everything I've been thinking but didn't know how to say. Really? Really? Lillian, I haven't felt this way about anyone since Sarah. Didn't think I could. But you and Evan, you've reminded me that life doesn't stop just because part of you wants it to. That opening up to someone new isn't betraying what you had. It's honoring it by choosing to keep living. Lillian felt tears threatening. I don't know how to do this. The whole relationship thing. I'm terrible at vulnerability, and I'm going to want to control everything, and I have a company that needs me. We'll figure it out, together. That's what people do. What if I mess it up? Then we'll unmess it. Lillian, I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for real, messy, complicated, imperfect real. She kissed him again, and this time it felt less like surprise and more like decision. Like choosing something that terrified her because the alternative, walking away, was worse. They spent the rest of the morning planning, not with spreadsheets or strategic projections, but with honest conversation about what a life together might look like. The logistics were complicated. She'd need to spend time in both cities, figure out custody arrangements with Marcus for company decisions, find a way to be present for both her work and her family without sacrificing either. But complicated wasn't impossible. It was just complicated. I can work remote more, Lillian said. Delegate better. Be in San Francisco when I need to be, but make Seattle home base, if you're okay with that. With us being here. Us? Me and Evan, if you want us. Caleb looked at her like she'd asked the most ridiculous question in the world. Lillian, I want you. I want this. I want to build something together. Not fast, not perfect, just real. That week turned into 2. Lillian pushed her return flight, then pushed it again. She took meetings from Caleb's dining room table while Maya did homework and Evan played on his mat. She learned the rhythms of this different life. Slower, more present, built around people instead of projects. And something inside her that had been clenched tight for years finally relaxed. Marcus flew up for a day to discuss the transition plan. They met at a coffee shop, and he took one look at her and grinned. So this is what happy Lillian looks like. I'd forgotten. Shut up. I'm serious. You look about 10 years younger. Seattle agrees with you. Caleb agrees with me. I figured. Listen, the board accepted the restructure. You'll stay on as strategic advisor, handle big decisions, but Chen and I will run day to day, which means you can actually have a life. Just like that? Just like that. Turns out when you build a competent team, they can function without you micromanaging every decision. Who knew? Lillian felt lighter than she had in years. Thank you, Marcus. For everything. For putting up with me, for building this with me, for knowing when to push me toward the exit. You're not exiting, you're evolving. There's a difference. Over the next months, they built something that didn't have a name but felt right anyway. Lillian split her time between cities, never quite belonging to either one but somehow belonging to both. Caleb and Maya visited San Francisco. Maya, delighted by the hills and the sea lions and the tech office where her second mom, a title she'd given Lillian despite all protests, did her mysterious work. They had their first fight 3 months in. Something stupid about scheduling that escalated because both of them were tired and scared and still learning how to navigate conflict. But they worked through it, apologized, and came out stronger. Because that's what people did when they chose each other. They showed up for the hard parts, too. Maya adjusted better than anyone expected. She had her moments, times when she missed being the only child, when she resented sharing her dad, when the grief of losing Sarah hit fresh and hard. But mostly, she embraced this expanding family with the adaptability of children who'd already survived the worst. And Evan, growing fast now, responded to this village, raising him with pure joy. He had Maya teaching him everything she knew, which was considerable. He had Caleb's patient presence and Lillian's fierce love. He had 2 homes and more family than most kids got. Lillian changed too. Not suddenly, not a dramatic transformation with a clear before and after, but gradually, like spring coming, she thawed. She learned to delegate, to trust, to be okay with good enough instead of always demanding perfect. She picked up her camera again, started taking pictures not just of special moments, but of ordinary ones, coffee cups and homework and the chaos of daily life. She called her mother. That conversation was harder than any board meeting she'd ever conducted, requiring more vulnerability than she'd shown in years. They didn't fix everything. Some wounds ran too deep for simple resolution. But they started talking, really talking, and that was enough. A year after that first flight, Lillian found herself on another plane, this time flying to Seattle with Evan, this time without panic or fear, this time heading home instead of escaping it. They hit turbulence 30 minutes in. Evan fussed slightly, and a woman across the aisle struggled with her own crying infant, face tight with that familiar expression of someone at the end of their rope. People around her were starting to stare, that same judgment Lillian remembered too well. She caught Caleb's eye. He'd come with her to San Francisco for the trip, some business of his own to handle, and saw him thinking the same thing. "Want me to?" he asked quietly. "Together," she said. They unbuckled, safely, with permission from the flight attendant, and approached the woman. She looked up with that mix of hope and suspicion that Lillian recognized intimately. "I know this is weird," Lillian said, "but we've both been exactly where you are. Would it help if one of us tried walking with her? Sometimes babies just need different arms." The woman looked like she might cry. "I've tried everything." "We know, but sometimes everything isn't enough until someone helps you carry it." Caleb took the baby, a little girl, maybe 4 months old, and started that same steady walk, that same rhythmic motion that had saved Lillian on a desperate flight a year ago. And just like then, magic happened. The baby settled. The cabin relaxed. The woman looked at them like they'd performed a miracle. "How did you do that?" she whispered. "Practice," Lillian said, and recognizing that asking for help isn't failure, it's wisdom. They talked for the rest of the flight. This woman who was a lawyer in Seattle, trying to balance a demanding career and new motherhood, convinced she was failing at both. Lillian listened to her story and heard echoes of her own. By the time they landed, they'd exchanged numbers, and Lillian had promised to introduce her to a parents' group she and Caleb had joined, a community of people figuring out how to be human instead of perfect. Walking through the airport, Maya holding Evan's hand as he toddled between them, Caleb looked at Lillian with that smile that still made her chest feel too full. "That was good," he said, "what we did back there. Paying it forward. More than that, showing her what you learned, that you don't have to do it alone." Lillian looked at their assembled crew, this family they'd built from grief and chance, and the decision to keep showing up. Not perfect. Maya still had her difficult days. Evan was entering the terrible twos with alarming enthusiasm. She and Caleb still fought about stupid things sometimes. She still worked too much occasionally, and he still got overwhelmed by single parenting when she was away. But they had each other, and that made the imperfect parts survivable. "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone," Lillian said, "that admitting you couldn't handle something alone was weakness. And now? Now I think real strength is knowing when to ask for help, when to let people in, when to admit that the life you built isn't the life you want, and having the courage to build a different one." Caleb shifted Evan to his other hip, took Lillian's hand with his free one. Maya was ahead of them, chattering about the new penguin exhibit they were going to see tomorrow, already planning the whole day with the confidence of someone who knew her family would show up for it. "You know what Sarah used to say?" Caleb asked. "What?" that life isn't about having it all. It's about having what matters and knowing the difference. Lillian thought about her old life. The 80-hour weeks, the constant achievement, the belief that worth was measured in accomplishments. Then she thought about this moment, airport fluorescents and tired kids and a man whose hand in hers felt like the only anchor she needed. She was right, Lillian said. They walked out into Seattle afternoon, into the life they'd chosen, into all the messy, imperfect, beautiful moments still waiting. Behind them, that lawyer from the plane was probably calling her partner, probably figuring out her own path forward. And somewhere, on some other flight, some other parent was struggling while everyone stared. But maybe someone would help them too. Maybe that was how it worked. We survived the hard things, and then we turned around and helped the next person survive theirs. Not because we had all the answers, but because we remembered what it felt like to need them. The taxi ride home was quiet. Evan dozed against Caleb's shoulder. Maya colored in a new book, tongue between her teeth in concentration. And Lillian watched her city, because it was her city now, as much as San Francisco, slide past the window and felt something she'd been chasing her whole life without knowing it. Peace. Not the absence of struggle or the achievement of perfection, but the deep, bone-level knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the people she was meant to be with, building exactly the life that mattered. That night, after everyone was asleep, Lillian stood on Caleb's back porch, their back porch now, and looked at the deck. He'd finished it last month, and they'd christened it with a family dinner that had been chaotic and perfect and everything in between. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through old photos. Found the ones from that first flight, from that desperate moment when she'd been drowning and a stranger had thrown her a lifeline. Then the photos from their first Target trip, the zoo, the pancakes. Evidence of a journey from isolation to connection. From perfection to presence. From having everything to having what mattered. Caleb appeared in the doorway, wearing the old Marines t-shirt he slept in, hair sticking up. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Just thinking." About? About how a year ago, I was on a plane, convinced I was failing at everything. And now I'm here, with you, with all of this. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "Regrets? Not even one. Even though your company's stock dipped when you stepped back, it recovered. And even if it hadn't, this is worth more." "This?" She turned in his arms, looked up at this man who'd seen her at her worst and decided she was worth staying for anyway. "This," she confirmed. "You, Maya, Evan, the life we're building. All of it." He kissed her forehead. "Sarah would have liked you, you know. She would have said you needed to learn to relax, but she would have liked you. I'm working on the relaxing part. I noticed. You only checked your email twice today. That's progress. That's incredible progress." They stood there, holding each other in the dark. And Lillian thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The ambitious 19-year-old dropping out of college, the relentless CEO building an empire, the terrified new mother convinced she was failing, the woman on a plane at the end of her rope. All those versions had led her here, to this moment, to this life, to understanding that strength wasn't about never breaking, it was about letting yourself crack open enough to let other people in. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For helping me that day on the plane, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for teaching me that asking for help isn't failure. You taught yourself that. I just gave you permission to believe it." Maybe that was true. Maybe she'd been ready to change and just needed someone to show her it was possible. Maybe Caleb and Maya had been the catalyst but not the cause. The match that lit kindling that had been waiting to burn. But however it happened, she was grateful. Inside, Evan started crying. Not upset, just awake and wanting company. Lillian started to move, but Caleb held her back. "I've got him. You stay here. Look at your deck." "Our deck." "Our deck." He disappeared inside, and Lillian heard him talking to Evan in that low, soothing voice he used for night wakings. Heard the baby settle almost immediately. Heard the soft sounds of a family existing in the dark, taking care of each other. She looked at the deck Caleb had built for Sarah but finished for them. Looked at the yard where Evan would learn to walk and Maya would grow up and birthday parties would happen. Looked at the house full of people who'd chosen each other despite every logical reason not to. And she understood finally what happy felt like. Not the rush of closing a deal or the validation of a Forbes cover, but this, quiet moments on back porches, sleeping babies, partners who showed up for midnight wakings, children who asked impossible questions and loved unconditionally. This was success. This was enough. This was everything. When Lillian Drake had boarded that plane a year ago, she'd been at the end of herself, drowning in expectations and isolation and the crushing weight of doing everything alone. She'd thought a stranger helping with her crying baby was just a moment of kindness, a brief respite in an otherwise relentless struggle. But it had been more than that. It had been an invitation to a different way of living, a reminder that humans weren't meant to survive alone, a demonstration that the most important decisions weren't made in boardrooms but in the small moments when you chose connection over isolation. And everything had changed because of it. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but truly. And in the end, that's all anyone could ask for, to be changed by love, to be strengthened by vulnerability, to build a life that mattered not because it was impressive, but because it was real. Lillian Drake had learned that lesson 35,000 feet above the ground, from a widowed contractor with steady hands and a 7-year-old with too many penguin facts. And she would spend the rest of her life grateful for the turbulence that had brought them together. Because sometimes the best things in life happen when you're falling apart. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you need help. And sometimes the person who saves you is the one you never saw coming.